was kind of nice to have technical issues to experience that, right? It's all planned. Okay. So when I was 6 years old, I joined the athletics club like my bigger sister. I entered the world of competitions, and you can see me here doing long jump on a picture from the 19s, and you see like I have perfect technique, even as a kid, yeah. But anyway, I loved the atmosphere on competition days, and I still enjoy the competition days. Nowadays, just from home, from a couch, watching TV, some chips. But this year, I was very hyped when the Olympics in Paris did happen. So, has anyone followed the Olympics in Paris this year? Oh yeah, a lot of people. Okay, cool, cool. Has anyone followed the Paralympics this year? Okay, actually a lot of people. That's cool. So I was actually mind blown by the Paralympics and the para-athletes, and it challenged my mindset of what I thought is possible in the world of sports. One of the disciplines at the Paralympics is called goalball. Ever heard of it? So it is a team sport for athletes with vision impairments. Teams of 3 people, and they throw a ball with bells inside into the opponent's goal. And everyone in the stadium has to be quiet, otherwise you wouldn't hear the bells. And all the athletes are blindfolded, so they all have the same level. So when I was watching a game of goalball on TV, I was actually wondering, how do blind people and people with low vision watch the sport? And I learned there is a device for it. Ever heard of the Vision Pad? Not to be confused, it's not the Vision Pro, it's the Vision Pad. It is actually an interactive tablet, and you can follow the movement of the ball by using a magnet. And the entire pad is tactile, so it also buzzes when a player scores a goal or commits a foul. And with additional audio descriptions, you can actually follow the tournament like everyone else. And this device enables a lot of people to follow the tournament. So the Vision Pad is only one example of how technology enables inclusion. So it's not a toy or nice to have. It is actually granting equal access to the joy of sport. And imagine yourself in a similar situation, maybe due to an injury or a sudden change of health. Any one of us might be in need of assistive technology someday. And I heard we all get older, yeah, and our abilities, they will change. That's a fact. So in 10 or 20 years from now, you'll probably use your phone in a different way than you would do today. But you would still want to have access to all the fun things. Accessibility is a human right. And we as developers, we actually play a crucial role in shaping the user experience. We can either create bridges or barriers. So let's do the right thing. By thinking about accessibility, we contribute to a future where no one is left behind, regardless of how our life changes. So hey, my name is Feli, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm very happy to be here today and to talk about my 2 favorite topics, accessibility and design systems. So I'm an iOS engineer at Spotify. I am from Nuremberg in Germany. I love sketchnoting. Maybe you've seen some of my sketchnotes before. I love all kind of different sports, and I know the next one is very controversial, but don't kick me off of the stage, please. But I really enjoy pineapple on pizza. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's more fun that way, right? Okay, so today I'm going to talk about how to ensure accessibility in design system components. But what even is a design system? So, do you know the difference between design system and system design? Is it actually the same thing? Well, no. So, system design is the process of architecting and structuring software to meet specific functional and technical requirements like scalability, security, or performance. while design system is usually a collection of reusable UI components, style guides, design principles, and all that to ensure consistency across a product's user interface. So especially this one should sound familiar to you if you've working on Apple platforms before, because actually Apple provides a lot of design system tools for us. So Apple's design system has colors, SF symbols, text, user controls, styles for buttons, and even whole list and cell styles. They also have guidelines in place, the human interface guidelines. But actually the best thing about Apple's design system is that the system UI components are accessible by default. This is actually a big win, because you don't have to know a lot about accessibility to get a somewhat good experience for your users. So why not just use what Apple provides? So sometimes the standard components from Apple are just not enough. You want something that's more unique. You want to create a brand, something that doesn't look like every other app. So design systems to the rescue. They can actually help you to limit some of the customization options that Apple's component have. So you can say you don't allow any color or any font, but only those that are specific to your company or your product. So at Spotify, we have a family of design systems. It's called Encore. It actually consists of multiple smaller, more focused systems owned by different teams. And they offer building blocks like shared code, design, but also documentation and guidelines. So at Spotify, hundreds of designers and even more developers work at Spotify. So you probably know the main consumer app, and it should run on all these devices. iPhones, Android phones, desktop, TV, and even fridges. So all of these products should look and feel like Spotify. And actually when you have accessibility inside these design system components, you can broaden your user base without putting too much effort on the feature teams that are creating these features. And Encore has some opinions about accessibility. So let's look at that. So the first one is, we need to ensure that you have enough color contrast. So text, for example, is easy to read. So in Encore, we provide different color themes, and if you stick to one theme and use colors from that, it's guaranteed that all these have sufficient color contrast. The next one is a classic, I would say. So don't exclusively rely on color to convey meaning. So here in the slide, you can see a shuffle button, but how would you know if it's activated or not? It's just an icon, really. So always try to consider changing both the shape and the color, because that makes it possible for users to identify the state, even if they're not able to see the active and inactive color. So that's why at Spotify, the shuffle button has a little dot underneath. And actually, if you think about it, UI is just one option to let the user interact with your product. So yes, information should be transported to the user. In case of the shuffle button, it's the extra dot that adds context whether the shuffle button is active or not. But it doesn't actually matter if it's a visual representation or if it's a sound or whatever, because it only matters that this information is delivered to the user. And then, of course, most of the time, the user can interact with the product and change the shuffle mode, for example. But does that action always has to be with your finger touching your device? We're actually so used to visual information that we sometimes forget we have more senses. But don't lick your phone. No, can't recommend. But if you think of the goal ball from the Paralympics earlier, so people with good vision, sure, they use the vision to follow the game. But blind people and people with low vision, they can't do that. So that's where the vision pad comes into place with the audio descriptions, and they focus on touch and hearing. But it's actually similar with our phones too. So People with good vision, yeah, they just look at the screen and use their vision for that, but people with low vision, they can't do that. So that's why we have screen readers on the Apple platforms. It's called VoiceOver. So we got a quick introduction to it yesterday already, but I'm going to explain it again. So the screen reader reads out information on the screen. So there are different ways to navigate. Either you move your finger around on the screen and VoiceOver is going to read out what you're focusing on, or you're using swipe gestures. Swipe to right is navigating forward, swipe to left is navigating backwards. And then you can do a double tap on the screen to interact with items. By the way, that's why I have the setup prepared. I have a live demo later. I'm going to show you how it's done. So in case of the shuffle button, VoiceOver is going to read out shuffle tracks off button when shuffle is off. And after you activated it, VoiceOver is going to announce shuffle tracks on. And you can see in the screenshot the little rectangle, that's the VoiceOver indicator. So I have prepared two versions of the Your Episodes page in the Spotify app. So this might be the experience if you don't optimize for VoiceOver. So just to say, this is a faked behavior in the app. I analyzed it with an app called Reveal, but you can also use the accessibility inspector for it. And each rectangle you see here is actually one focus item for VoiceOver. So I mean, it's good that every element is accessible in a way. Good. But imagine swiping through that list with a screen reader, like swiping to the right, one gesture, navigating to the next item. So there are actually two issues here. So it is a lot of swipes. So it is very inefficient navigation. But also it's missing context because all the content has the same priority. It's on like one level. So if you're navigating back and forth, which episode would you download when you reach the download button? Like you have to know the context. So it would actually be better if every episode would be grouped one focus item. So you might wonder how to access the buttons now. And there's an API for it called UI Accessibility Custom Actions. And VoiceOver will announce actions available, and there's a specific gesture to interact with the buttons. I'm going to show you later. So I was wondering, what's the reason we have to actively think about that scenario? We don't have the same issue when we just look at the screen. And that's actually because the design uses some best practices. So the first one is called Law of Common Region. So elements with a border or a similar background, they appear as a group. And then there's Law of Proximity, which is elements that are closer together. They also appear in groups. So when you apply these best practices, the content actually is not flat on one level, but they appear in groups. Okay, so I'm going to show you one example of Encore, one component, and it's called List Row. It is using a slot-based architecture, so you can configure different slots, leading, media, pre-title, title, subtitle, trailing body, footer. Okay, only the title slot is mandatory. So this is just a layout component. So should we think about accessibility here? I mean, we just learned, especially in lists, you might want to group content together for a nice experience. So how can we apply that to the generic component? Do we want that all the feature developers have to think about accessibility, or should it just work? How do we get the best accessibility support as possible for our users? So let's start by looking at the developer experience. On a scale of no input is needed to a lot of input is needed, when accessibility just works out of the box, no input is needed, nice. I would take that. On the other side, when the out-of-the-box approach is not working, a lot of effort, but also knowledge of the developer is needed. There's also a middle layer where we can support the developer with an API to explicitly ask for the information that we need, and also have good documentation in place to explain how things work. On the user experience side, you can have a range from nothing is working for accessibility, from minimal accessibility support, great support, and the best experience ever. And I was wondering, how do we bring these two together? It's like finding a trade-off between developer input and accessibility experience, ideally. We don't want to overwhelm a developer, but still get the best experience ever. And to be honest, I was a bit lost. I didn't know how to do that. So here I show an image from this Foslian with two scenarios. The first shows a discouraged person, aka me, with a massive wall, and a text that says, "Don't set the bar too high on your first try." And the other scenario shows a person climbing the stairs with the text, "Aim a little higher as you climb." So I looked for some help, and I found the help from the Encore teams, and we came up with some guidelines to approach that problem. And the first one is a classic for me, progress over perfection. So I always want to have it perfect right away, but honestly, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's better to just start somewhere and then update over time. The next guideline is also a good one. There's no such thing as perfect accessibility. We can conform to guidelines and follow best practices, but in the end, you need to get feedback from real users and find out if things work like you intended. And every user has unique needs, so it's about finding compromises. And also, I always try to think of accessibility as a journey. It's not a task that you can check off and never come back to. And the third guideline is, provide different levels of abstraction. So don't just create one API that should solve all your use cases, but have different ones. But what do I mean with that? So imagine 80% of the use cases for your component are simple. The developer uses the component like you imagined. Everything just works. They use it all the time. And it's kind of obvious how to use that API. For the remaining 20% of the use cases, the developer might need something different. They want an additional icon in front of the pre-title. They want a custom control here and there. So they need a bit more flexibility, so a bit more detailed API. They might only use it from time to time, but it still should be easy to use. And just a tiny part of the use cases, they need something even more detailed, like a low-level API. They have full control of whatever they need to. And it might happen that this thing is only used rarely. So the fun thing is now, each one of these layers is built on top of each other. So if one layer doesn't meet your requirements, you can just drop down to the next one. You have more control, but also you need to take over some of the responsibilities. Okay, let's see if we can come up with a game plan. So first step would be nice to have the 80% of the use cases and an out-of-the-box solution as easy as possible. How would that look like? Let's look at some code. So let's gonna instantiate the list row component. At the bottom right, you can see a preview of the UI and a text with what VoiceOver is gonna read out. Let's start with the media slot. Let's add an image. When this component is used in lists, usually the image is just nice to have, a decorational element. So in this case, VoiceOver is not gonna read out anything. Then we have the pre-title slot. Let's just add most shared podcast in Sweden. So this is important information. So internally, we use it, so VoiceOver is going to announce it. Then we have the title, Damn Fine Coffee. This is also added to VoiceOver. And then we have a trailing button with more actions. And internally, since we know it's a button, it's going to be added as a custom action. Okay, so all this code is actually written you don't have to have any clue about accessibility. So how does this work internally? So internally, we have a setup function with the content, so all the slot information as a function parameter. So to group all the elements together, we mark the row as an accessibility element. This makes actually the efficient navigation and the context clear. And then we go through all the accessibility properties, in this case the accessibility label, and we just ask the content, hey, give us the computed label. So internally, each of these slots has their own accessibility label, and we just merge them together with a comma if they're not empty. The next one is the custom action. So we ask the content, hey, do you have buttons? Give us your buttons, and we add them to the custom actions. The next one is called accessibility custom content, and works the same way. We just ask the content, give us the information. And we're going to see what that means later as well. And then we have another property called accessibility user input labels, and this is important for voice control. Again, we're going to see that later. Okay, cool. But what about SwiftUI? We all love SwiftUI, right? So actually, SwiftUI has more accessibility support than UIKit, and this wonderful function called accessibility element children combine, and this will group the content together, and that's all we have to do. Okay, sometimes the out-of-the-box approach is not enough, so let's go back to our game plan. If the out-of-the-box solution is not efficient, we add an explicit API where we ask for the information that we need. It should be still easy to use, but a bit more work for the developer. So I'm going to introduce you to another component at Encore with a little bit of less abstraction. It's called the box component. Very proud of that animation. Okay, so this is the box. It is very, very generic. It has a specific corner radius. You can configure the background style. And this is actually what the list row component is using under the hood. But yeah, since it's so generic, we have no information what the content really represents semantically. So let's look at the API where we ask for the information from the developer. Okay, same again. We'll instantiate the box component. At the bottom right, you can see a preview of the UI and a text with what VoiceOver is going to read out. So let's just add a content view. Can be anything really, just a custom view. But then we ask the developer to provide additional information for accessibility, so there's no way they can forget about that. So we'll ask for an accessibility label. It's actually all the text you can see on the component preview. Then we have the accessibility value. It's all the state information. So in this case, the playlist we see, it's playing, so we add currently playing. Then we have an accessibility hint. This one is optional, but it should describe what happens when the user interacts with the element. So you could add, for example, navigate to playlist if it's needed. The next one is called accessibility traits. And it should describe what the component means semantically. So in this case, it actually navigates to a playlist, so it is a button. And then we have the accessibility custom actions. So for any other button that is inside the component, in this case, the play pause button. Okay, so for more support, the code documentation we have added contains a lot of descriptions and examples, and even if you have never heard of these properties before, you get an idea of what you need to pass. Okay, back to our game plan. If all the previous components are not flexible enough, you can still build a custom component with all the other building blocks and tokens that Encore provides, for example, different color tokens and label and buttons. But yeah, step 3 is actually to have some additional guidelines in place that are going to support the developer. So this is just one example, but how should the component behave for large font sizes? So for dynamic type. So ideally, we switch from a horizontal layout to a vertical layout. It's called the narrow layout in Encore, and this behavior is included in the list row component, for example, out of the box. Okay. Enough theory. Let's do the fun part for you and the scary part for me. Let's do the live demo. Okay, here we go. So the first one, you can actually take out your phones and follow me. We are going to set up some accessibility shortcuts. So you can go to your Settings app, and you should have a section there called Accessibility. And then you scroll to the button. And the second last item is called Accessibility Shortcut. If you navigate there, you see a list of all the assistive technology that's enabled on an iPhone. And actually, the list is quite long. So you can just enable anything you want to, but I would recommend to enable voiceover and voice control for the beginning. If you're very brave, you can try out switch control. But wait for the demo, otherwise you might be stuck and never exit again. Okay, and if you have that set up, you can have a triple tap on the power button and show the menu of the accessibility shortcuts. And it's just a quick way to enter and exit the accessibility settings. So let's start with VoiceOver first.
VoiceOver on, Encore, list row component, back button.
Okay, amazing, the sound works. Okay, like I said, there are different ways to navigate around. So either you move your finger.
Most shared podcast in Jish hide list row component, back button.
Or you can use swipe gestures, swipe to the right, navigating forward, swipe to the left, navigating backward.
Hide guide, but Jish fill, but most shared podcast in Sweden, damn fine coffee. Actions available.
So now you heard the list row component and what VoiceOver is going to read out. You might notice the actions available at the end. That is an indicator for the custom actions we have added. And now the fun thing, we're going to activate the VoiceOver rotor. So you take your two fingers and like you would open a bottle.
More content, actions, activate.
And you see a menu appears in the middle of the screen with a lot of different...
Describe more actions, activate.
Different sections, but we're going to work with the actions one for now. So we select the actions, and now you can swipe up or down on your screen to navigate through the custom actions.
Listen.
Listen, that's the button in the footer.
More options.
More options is the 3 dots button at the side. Oh. I don't know how to do that. Okay. But a double tap with one finger is going to activate the action. Yeah.
Alert. List row. Hello. Perfect grinning face with starry eyes. Button. Most shared podcast in Sweden. Damn fine coffee. Swipe up or down to select a custom action. Then double tap to activate.
Yeah, and sometimes you get an even longer hint from VoiceOver what you can do. So that was the custom actions, but you might notice VoiceOver is not gonna read out the long text in the middle, and that actually was an intentional decision from us because sometimes in long lists, especially for episodes, podcast episodes, a user can add a very long description about the episode, and if you imagine that's going to be read out every time, you're just trying to find one specific podcast. So intentionally we said okay, this is additional information, it's not too important. The user can still access it though. So
more content.
There's a VoiceOver rotor called More Content, and if you select that one and swipe up.
Wait a minute. Star slurp star. You know. This is. Excuse me. A damn fine cup of coffee.
Yes, it is a damn fine cup of coffee. Okay.
Alert. Accessibility shortcuts.
So triple tap to the side, it's gonna appear the shortcut menu again.
Selected. VoiceOver button.
And a double tap.
VoiceOver off.
And now you can use your phone again, like you used to. So let's look at another one. Nope. Triple tap, right? Not a double tap. And let's try out voice control. So I can actually recommend this one to you to just try it out, because you can still you can use your phone like you used to, like no specific actions needed, something to learn. It's easy to exit as well. But now, since we've enabled voice control, you can see that a few rectangles appear on the screen with numbers. So that's one mode of voice control, but it also has another mode where you can see names. Show names. Okay, that worked, good. And now you see a list of rectangles appear with the actual name of things. Since iOS 18, it's going to just use the first word of your accessibility user input labels. It's just quicker for the user and less error prone to say that. So a user can say, show actions for damn. I hope that's okay to say in a presentation. And it's going to show the custom actions in a different way, so it's just a bottom sheet. And now you see the numbers again. You can say tap 1. And yeah, you tapped on the context button. And all that without using your finger. It's just voice commands. Okay. So there's another mode I want to show you for voice control. It's called grid mode. Show grid. So now you see an overlay with a lot of numbers in the grid, and you can say tap 12, and you can access the buttons in a similar way. Okay, that's it. By the way, one thing is you can use Siri to turn on and off voice control, also voiceover. Oh, tap confirm. Confirm. Okay, nice sound effects. Okay, so do I have more time? Yeah, I think so. So let's be brave today, brave together, and let's try out switch control. But first, we have to go to the settings to do that. So in the accessibility section in settings, you can see switch control here. And to set this up, you need to configure some switches. So I can recommend you to set up a full screen tap to select an item. Just this one is enough usually. And important thing to note is the scanning style. So if you only have one switch set up, the scanning style has to be auto scanning. Okay, let's be brave and do that. Oh. It's so dark, I don't see the... Oh, it's off, okay. Okay, now you see a blue rectangle. It's automatically scanning for elements. That's the scanning mode, auto style. And now if you have configured your switch to a full screen tap, you actually just have to wait until you reach the component and then a tap. It's going to show you another pop-up here that's specific to switch control. It has the standard action to just tap on the item, but also you can see the custom actions here, the more options and the listen button. So you have to wait and then tap again to interact. Okay. No. Okay, let's try out the manual scanning now, but therefore you have to set up 2 more switches. So now the rectangle is not going to move on its own, but you're controlling the navigating back and forth one. So it's actually fun to scroll through the different switches that are available. So you can use head gestures, you can have an additional device for it. So for me, I use 2 sound signals, one cluck and one sh to navigate back and forth. Let's gonna see. Okay, now we see the rectangle is not gonna move forward. So I'm gonna okay, it worked. Shh. Okay. Okay. Did I turn it off? No. Okay, and again, activating it with a single tap. That didn't change. Okay. Let's gonna turn this off again, if I'm lucky. Okay, so I mentioned switch control is only for the brave ones, because sometimes it works to turn it off with Siri. Most of the times it does not work. So if you forgot which switches you have set up, well, have fun. So one workaround I found out, so if you ever find yourself stuck in switch control, you can use Siri to turn on voice control. And voice control is gonna be able to turn off switch control. I am not sure. Maybe that is one of the AI features that are gonna come to Siri. Okay, let's go back. Okay, whew. So let's have a quick summary. So I shamelessly stole this idea from my friend Danny, and I made a sketch note of my own talk as a summary. So we talked about the Olympics and the Paralympics and how the vision pad makes the sport more inclusive. Yes, that is a good time to make a picture, yeah. We talked about having 5 senses, so we should not only focus on vision. We talked about law of proximity and common region to group content together visually. We talked about differences between system design and design system. We had a little intro to what Encore is at Spotify with an example of the shuffle button, but also the list row and the box component. We learned that Apple system UI components are accessible by default. And then we investigated how to bring the developer experience and the accessibility experience closer together. And lastly, we had some guidelines. So the first one is progress over perfection. The second one, there's no perfect accessibility. And the third one, provide different levels of abstraction. So maybe as an action point to take away, try out VoiceOver, test it with your apps, and yeah. Thanks for having me, and have a great rest of the conference. And reach out to me if you ever get stuck in switch control or voice control. I can help you to get out.
Thank you very much, Feli. So, coffee break. See you back in 26 minutes. Cheers.